to it. So let's go ahead and jump into the second video, which is actually going to be the definition of systemic racism.
And then I heard of this thing called systemic racism, and I was like, well, crap. Systemic racism is when a group of people have less opportunities, not because of individuals being racist, but entire systems being racist. These systems are often either political, economic, or social systems, and they're also often connected. It's different from individual racism, aka personal racism, the more explicit form of racism in which individuals are racist, or even institutional racism, in which large and important organizations are racist. Today, those two forms are indeed less common than they were in the 1960s. But a lot of people deny that systemic racism exists. Wait, what?
The United States does not have systemic racism.
There is no such thing as systemic racism. Stop feeling guilty. It doesn't exist.
I think there's individual racism, but the idea that there's widespread systemic racism does not exist.
Okay. There is no systemic racism in this country. Dr. King eliminated that with the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act.
Systemic racism does not exist. There are no laws in America, meaning the system. Doesn't mean racism doesn't exist. Racism exists. There are people who are racist, and you should do everything you can to show them that their ideas are wrong, and that you should not be judging someone based on their race, of course. But the idea that there is systemic racism, meaning that there are laws in place that treat black people differently or Asian people differently or white people differently, simply doesn't exist.
But hold on, whoever that dude with the expensive suit speaking at Oxford was doesn't know the definition of systemic racism. Remember, the definition of systemic racism is when a group of people has less opportunities due to entire systems being racist. It's not
laws in place that treat black people differently or Asian people differently or white people differently.
No, the laws are pretty much fine. Again, we mostly fixed all that back in the 1960s. At least in the United States. It's the enforcement of the law. See, that's an example of how the criminal justice system has been racist.
Systemic racism, that charge, is a ruse, and it's to say everything in our country is infected. Every institution, every system, from the top to the bottom, from the beginning to the end, it's all infected.
Everything in our country is infected.
I am making this video because a lot of people still deny that systemic racism exists. And it's almost always because they don't even understand the definition of systemic racism. It's like not believing the tooth fairy is real and then describing the tooth fairy as a giant bunny who delivers eggs on Easter.
Okay, so let me dig into this real quick. Then I'll open it up to everybody else. So I want to make it perfectly clear that if anybody tried to explain systemic racism as there are no laws on the books, we didn't say anything about the laws. It's not the laws. It's the enforcement of the laws. Such as, and we'll listen to them either today or tomorrow, such as the war against drugs. When basically, let's go with cocaine and crack. If you have 5 ounces of crack, you will get the same amount of 5 ounces of crack and 5,000 ounces of cocaine. Why? Because it shows that in the black community, blacks use crack more than whites. Whites use cocaine more than crack. But you notice this disparity of the ounces. It's not the laws. Well, that is the law. That's stupid. So sorry, it is laws. It's the enforcement of it. You can put laws into place such as, hey, a policeman can just pull you over in the streets of New York and pull you over the streets and frisk you. No rhyme or reason. They just saw you walking down the street and decide to do so. already I can hear people saying that's an isolated incident and that's a high crime area and the police are just doing their job. And I get, but this is the part where I said last week that I'm not going to argue with you, because if I give you an example of what I'm saying and you already have your excuses as why I'm wrong, why am I arguing with you? It's a waste of time. But again, I'm just here to introduce the videos. Anybody else that want to talk, feel free.